USCHO.com.
Welcome to USCHO Weekend Review for Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly and Derek Schooley. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your seats today. Well, guys, it was holiday tournament time. And first of all, Happy New Year. We're glad to be back on Weekend Review. Lots of tournaments, which is pretty cool. Let's start out with Wisconsin in Milwaukee, winning the Quick Trip Holiday Classic, 3-0 shutouts of Air Force and Northeastern.
I had a chance to watch those games, obviously watching Air Force, and we were off until the 31st. So Happy New Year to everybody. So I had a chance to watch all the holiday tournaments, and I was really impressed with Wisconsin. They were smothering. They had some offensive skill. Guy Blessing was outstanding for Air Force to keep that game to where it was at 3-0, but they just did a really good job. And I was really surprised with Kyle McClellan. And my only history with Kyle McClellan is within Atlantic hockey when he was at Mercyhurst. And I didn't see it as much as, Mercyhurst did. And you know what? That's why everybody's got their own preference of people, but he was really good. And he proved me wrong. And it was good to see for them. It was really neat, though. Frank Serratori checked another bucket list off of playing one of his former players in Mike Hastings. There's a whole bunch of us out there, myself, Mike Corbett, Marco Siki, guys that he's coached against. And that was really neat to see that. And then he got to play against Scott Sandlin, a longtime friend. But Wisconsin was dominating and unbelievable crowds. They had the upper bowl tarped off, but it was banged out. The lower bowl, 8,000 a night. Great atmosphere, all red. And Wisconsin took care of business.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've said this a little bit already this season, but is this Minnesota? Is this Wisconsin's team starting to look like Minnesota State or what? I mean, they, as you said, smothering defensively, good goaltending. Doesn't have to be great, but it was always there in position to make the big saves. I mean, I was really impressed. I like you, Derek, got a chance to at least watch one game. I got to watch the Air Force game, and I thought that Wisconsin was terrific. And I thought that Air Force had some good chances. But every time they seemed to get into that scoring zone, there were two Wisconsin players to shut them down. And then if anytime they got that real good grade A, then there was McClellan. I'm impressed by Wisconsin. What a way to start the second half for Mike Hastings and crew.
Well, before we move on, I'm going to take over the role of host on this one because obviously Ed has the insight of the Ledger Bank Classic. What a premier event. Tell me they did a great job like they always do up there, Ed. And tell us a little bit about the Ledger Bank Classic. How was that for a segue?
Well, that's very good. I can only tell you about what happened at the rink. We didn't get to take part in any of the other festivities, which I hear have been great, but we weren't invited to any of that. So all I can tell you about, maybe it's not quite the way it used to be. I mean, it was a very well-run tournament. Love the arena. Little disappointed. I expected some bigger crowds there, although the Maine fans and the RIT fans traveled pretty well. But I want to talk about Maine because they are terrific. And, we talk all the time about Bradley Nadeau and Josh Nadeau and Lyndon Breen, the senior, who's the centerman. By the way, you expected the two brothers to be from the same town in the same province, but Lyndon Breen also from New Brunswick. So it's a whole New Brunswick line. They are terrific offensively. They are probably, I'm going to go out on a limb and say they're the best line in college hockey this season. But what really impressed me about Maine is they give you absolutely no time or space. They are right on you right away. If you make a mistake, it's going to be in the back of your net. They are just a machine. And I really think that it's not going out on a limb to say that we could see Maine in the Frozen Four this year. They're number one in the PairWise now. they took a game that was 1-1 and in about 3 minutes made it a 4-1 game. Was 4-2 most of the rest of the way, and then the empty net goal. And they did the same thing with Dartmouth. It was tight, and then they blew it open. So I'm very impressed with Maine, and really had a great time up at that tournament.
Well, I'll tell you, the one signature of Maine, going back to the days of Sean Walsh, was their ability to score in bunches. He loved that. That was an objective of his every game that he wrote out, was to score 3 goals in less than 2 minutes. And that was something he wanted to hit every game. And you can see that right now, Ben Barr, I don't know if he's exactly taking it from Sean Walsh's playbook, but they love to score in bunches, and they can do it. And once they feed off that goal momentum. Some teams, they score a goal and then they go, "Ooh, got that goal, thank God." No, Maine says, let's get another one, and let's get another one. And you could see it. I saw that RIT game that you're talking about, Ed, and that was quick. I think I walked out to the kitchen to get something to drink, and it was 1-1. I came back, it was 3-1, and then it was 4-1. And it's like, that's just how quick they score. They score in bunches. They have the offense right now. They have the depth. Now it's just staying healthy. I think every team faces the same challenge, but if this team stays healthy, and they can bring some of these big horses with them into the postseason, they're a dangerous team.
And let's not overlook their goaltender, Victor Ostman, who's terrific.
Fantastic. I think he was the most valuable player of the tournament too, correct?
I never saw that information. I was gone from the arena and never saw a release.
Yeah, so. I think I saw that he ended up being the MVP. Deservedly so. He's fantastic.
Well, that wasn't the only pair of tournaments. Also, one in Lake Placid, Michigan Tech and Arizona State both won tournaments in shootouts. Arizona State over Cornell at Lake Placid, and in the GLI, Michigan Tech in the shootout. Let's talk about Arizona State. A win would have been a lot better for them than that tie PairWise. They're kind of stuck at 16. And as I watched 16, 17 in that range, we're getting into the part of the year where it's really hard to move much in the PairWise, Maine aside, which did very well getting a team with a high winning percentage to win against. But Arizona State sitting right now at 16, but had a really good weekend and a good measure of how good they are up against Cornell.
Well, I watched the championship game, and so I just saw Arizona State live right before break. I thought Arizona State power play was really good against us, and I just thought our penalty killing was just okay. But I will tell you this, their power play is outstanding. They move the puck. They've got a quarterback in Timmy Lovell, and Matthew Copper, who leads the nation in power play goals, is outstanding from the side. That was a really, really good hockey game. They had to come from behind against Clarkson. And then the game against Cornell, there wasn't a lot of space. You think of Arizona State right now as this high-scoring team, but they got down and dirty against Cornell. And the overtime, I know you want to talk about that because I also watched the Great Lakes tournament. The overtime was outstanding. It was back and forth. The last minute and a half was up and down, chance for chance, like overtime's meant to be. And if all the rumors the NHL wants to stop you from taking the puck back across the red line and 3-on-3 overtime and all that, I'd be all for it because that was what 3-on-3 overtime was supposed to be. And then TJ Sentenfelder was outstanding. He was outstanding against us, and he was outstanding against Cornell, and that's why they went home with that trophy. And side note, I think they're moving that to Thanksgiving next year, that tournament. And really cool to see a tournament there. Big crowds, too, there with Cornell and Clarkson and Arizona State, who travels well.
Yeah, I was very impressed with the comebacks. Going down 2-0 both nights, 5 straight goals on Friday, and then ending up in the tie and then winning the shootout on Saturday. You talk about a pretty complete tournament. That's what Arizona State played. They proved that they can get down. I know you'll testify to this, Derek. You don't love to chase games. You don't want to be continually putting your team in a position where they're down a couple of goals every night. But I think when you have the confidence that you can come back, because you have done it a few times, that is something that really it can work in your favor. You don't want to keep digging holes, and we know that chasing hockey in the postseason is usually losing hockey. But this is a confident team right now. There's still only 3 losses, I believe, on their schedule. They've got a bunch of ties, but only 3 losses thus far. I know that they're on the outside looking in right now in the pairwise technically. But they're really close. And I know that they don't have a lot of room for error, but I like the way they're playing.
They came back. You talked about chasing games. They came back within like 15 seconds on when Cornell made it 2-0. It was boom. They scored right away and took the momentum right out of the building. And then they got a power play and kept the momentum going. And they didn't score on that, and then opened up the period of the power play goal. They took that right back. And that's the sign of a mature team. They're built to win now. Let's call a spade a spade. They're built with all these home games they've got and everything that they're getting, all the return games. Going in the NCHC next year is going to be a challenge for them. They need to win right now and win a lot, and they're doing that.
We've been talking about how nice it is to see in-season tournaments. We had the turkey leg at Thanksgiving, kind of some predetermined matchups there. Should we have more tournaments in season? Is this a good thing?
I personally love it. I think it's great. It breaks up the monotony of a college hockey season, which does build up. Seeing a bunch of non-league opponents doesn't always draw crowds, but I think when there's a trophy on the line, people get a little bit more excited. See the crowds in Wisconsin this weekend. I think it also, I've heard coaches say that it kind of simulates what you go through in the postseason. Lose one game and you don't have a chance to win a trophy anymore. So I like those aspects of it. I miss the days when we had the Denver Cup, we had the Mariucci in Minnesota. Schools, you guys had the one in Pittsburgh that was fantastic. I got to go to there. I think it was 7 years ago when I was working for Lowell and broadcast there. It was a fantastic building, fantastic atmosphere. So that these tournaments that used to exist, I'd love to see some of them come back. I'd love, Pittsburgh was a great city to visit. So that was one. And you guys treated us really well there. And, going to Minnesota and the Mariucci and playing in front of 10,000 fans at Mariucci, I think was a fantastic thrill for the players too. So some of those tournaments, I'd love to see them get back. I know there's logistics and stuff like that, but what's there right now, let's hope that continues because, the Gazelle group that's doing the Wisconsin tournament, they're doing a great job. Obviously, we know what Ledger Bank does, the GLI. Now this Adirondack tournament, from everything I heard, it was kind of first class. I'm glad for that. And like you said, Derek, good crowds there as well. So hopefully these stick around and maybe we get 1 or 2 more back next year.
I think the one thing that you look at, and you see it with the GLI, which we still need to talk about Michigan Tech winning, but it's almost got to be outside of your arena. It can't be in your own building. You said, Ed, you were disappointed with the Dartmouth crowds a little bit. And I think that if you look at Milwaukee's outside of their arena, Adirondack Invitational, because you're always going to have one good gate. And I think this is why these tournaments have stopped a little bit. The Mariucci Classic, they're going to fill up Minnesota against, let's just say,
anybody.
They're going to fill up the crowd. Are they going to fill it up an afternoon game? Robert Morris versus Lowell? Maybe not. So you got to pay guarantees. You got to pay people to get there for those other games. It sometimes could be cheaper. But if you look at the successful ones right now, they're not in their own building. They're in a neutral site, and they count as a neutral site game for PairWise. And you're banging them out in neutral site areas. I know the Lowell game, the Lowell turkey leg that you're talking about was different because it was in 2 different cities or 2 different buildings. So you're always guaranteed a home crowd, which you could do, just like the Icebreakers went to now. 2 different teams hosting, and it's different crowds. So I think that's the one thing that you're fighting a little bit. And we're running the finances too about, we want to get the 3 Rivers Classic back. It was great, but it's got to make sense financially to bring 4 teams in or to have 3 other teams come in and make it where there's more than just 2 games attended. I don't know if that makes sense, but I agree. You got to look at it as it's got to be a destination. People want to go. Like I think there's one next year. I might be Palm Springs. I think is hosting one next year. You're going to see that pop up here. I might be announcing something I probably shouldn't, but so I've heard through the grapevine, Palm Springs is going to happen. We're playing in the Desert Classic next year, so it'll be fun to see how Arizona State does it when we're not the feature game. We're going to play the feature. We're going to play Arizona State one game, but then obviously the other games, how you manage that. And I think another thing that you're saying, when you're the home team, they're always playing the 7:30 game no matter what.
Right.
So like Wisconsin got upset by Air Force. They were still playing the third place game at 7:30.
And Arizona State this upcoming week, they will do that. If they were to lose to Harvard in the opener, they'll still play the late game, even if it's the consolation game. I never loved that, but I get it. I totally get that.
Well, we did forget to encapsulate what happened with Michigan Tech, a 3-2 win in overtime over Alaska, and then a 3-3 tie with Michigan State and a shootout win for the Huskies. A good weekend for them in the GLI.
I watched the game against, I guess it was the Michigan Tech. They came back against Fairbanks. I was impressed by Fairbanks. Fairbanks took it to them, but they just lost the momentum, and they just, you talk about tournaments and trophy season, as Jerry York used to call it. Jerry York used to also call it Christmas hockey, because Boston College came to our tournament a couple times because he's got family in Pittsburgh, but he would call it Christmas hockey. Christmas hockey tends to get a little bit mistake-filled, a little bit away from your game, a little sloppy, and you can tend to get a little bit tired quickly. And if one team could seize the momentum like Michigan Tech did, it's hard with the other team on their heels. And that looked a lot like Christmas hockey. Big overtime win for Tech as they came back, but then obviously big win over Michigan State. The more you get away from Christmas, the more games you get, the more you get away from playing Christmas hockey.
I'm still impressed by Tech winning that tournament. Of course, it's on home ice. I don't like that. I kind of miss Michigan in the tournament too. I know that there's now a lot of hard feelings because Michigan wouldn't play Tech there a few years ago during COVID. I feel like the administrations have changed within the Michigan team. I think that they should put them back in the tournament. I miss Michigan in that tournament. I mean, I know that they dominated it, and maybe that's why you want them out. But come on, the GLI should be 4 Michigan teams. You don't need. I no disrespect to Alaska, because I thought that they played great hockey over both nights. But you don't need Alaska in the tournament. You need 4 Michigan teams there.
Yeah, probably at some point. But once all the details came out about how that actually went down, as opposed to how it was advertised, I think you can understand leaving them out for a little while till all the hurt settles down. Anyway, before we go to the break, a couple of other quick notes. Army, I saw them the beginning of November, and I said, this is a better team than their record says. They started out 0-9. Since then, 5-3, and a 6-3 win over number 16 New Hampshire. Gavin Abrick was terrific in net for Army.
I saw them during that Turkey Lake Classic tournament during Thanksgiving, and they were just starting to win. I think they had just gotten their first win against Canisius the previous weekend. They're playing confident now. And that game against New Hampshire, banged out Tate rink. Love seeing that. And then the ability to put some pucks in the net against a New Hampshire team that's been good defensively, good goaltending wise. They haven't given up a lot this year. So when I saw the score 6-3, that one kind of stuck out at me. Great win for Brian Riley, though. I know he was very proud of that one.
Yeah, it's a signature win for Army in their season, and gets them a little bit of confidence as a team that they're chasing us. I don't like to see that. I love to see it for the program. For the league, I don't like to see them get a little confidence. We still have them on our schedule, but great for the league. And the big question is, how bad is that loss going to hurt New Hampshire down the stretch? Didn't move them that far yet.
It didn't yet, but that one still hurts. You're now going from I think they were 11th in the PairWise going in, and now I think they're around 13. So that bumps you into that bubble territory.
But now the Army, they got to hope that Army starts winning some games. That's the thing. When you lose that game, you got to hope other people that it wasn't a one-off.
One other team that has been on a tear is Vermont. They extended their winning streak to 5 in a row by sweeping visiting St. Thomas.
Yeah, I want to see Vermont now carry this into league play. This has been a lot of non-league games, not a lot of non-league wins. They've got to bring this back into Hockey East. The one thing I will say, and we're going to get into the PairWise after the break, but if teams like Vermont and Hockey East start pulling off some of these wins in league play, and they come against teams that are at the top, I know we're talking about how good Hockey East has been this year. This is what can kind of cannibalize the success of a league. Hockey East right now in great position in the PairWise, but if you start having teams like Vermont or Lowell or Northeastern come from the bottom and start winning games here in the second half of the season, could be a little bit tumultuous in those PairWise rankings. We'll get to that after the break, but good couple of wins for Vermont. They're playing well. Steve Weidler, I got to talk to him before the break, broadcast one of his games. It was a 2-1 loss, but I think that they play strong. They look like a bit of a different team, and they're starting to get a little bit more of Steve Weidler's identity underneath them as this season progresses.
Yeah, I also got to peek in a little bit at that game, and that was a fast-paced game. And granted, I think when I turned it on, it was already a lead for Vermont, and St. Thomas was trying to chase the game, and it was one of my first opportunities to see St. Thomas this year. But I was kind of surprised. I don't think on your bingo card, you would have your prognosticator, the Edge podcast that you guys do. We would have had a 5-1 and 4-1 win for Vermont going into it. But St. Thomas, who was on fire in November, has cooled off a little bit, and they're going back and forth. A split with Ferris, a split with Minnesota State, and now 2 losses, and a split with Lake Superior State before that. And they had a 4-game winning streak where everybody was kind of wondering where they were going to be, and now I think they're coming back to the pack a little bit.
By the way, a quick note on Vermont too. This is a 5-game winning streak. First time since 2017 they've had that. It was also the last time that Vermont scored 14 goals in 3 games. They had 5-4-5 in this last 3-game stretch. They hadn't scored 14 goals in 3 games since 2017. Offense is starting to go for this Vermont team.
I don't think my team scored 14 this year.
Well, let's take a break. We know what's going to be worked on in practice today. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen Four, April 11 and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota.
Where are my hockey fans at? Present! Welcome to Fandom 101. It's NCAA Ice Hockey Championship time, when the hottest teams in the country face off under one roof. Be there to see your squad hoist the ultimate trophy overhead. The NCAA Men's Frozen Four, April 11th and 13th in St. Paul, Minnesota. Attendance is encouraged. Passion is mandatory. Buy your seats today at ncaa.com/mfrozenfour. Class dismissed.
Well, we're back with USCHO Weekend Review. We're really officially at the halfway point of the season. Most teams have played half or more of their games, and it's a chance for us to take another look at non-conference records. And the reason we do that is because how leagues do out of conference really determines how many teams they're going to have in the tournament and in the bubble in the top 16 in the PairWise. The Big Ten right now at 730 out of conference, 42-14-5. That is spectacular. I'm going to hit the other 2 that are above 500. Hockey East at 685 and NCHC at 680. And right now, these leagues would all have multiple teams in the tournament. At least a third of their league would probably be in the tournament right now.
Yeah, I mean, we'll translate this directly. Big Ten would have 4 out of 7 in the tournament if the season ended today. NCHC would have 4 out of 8, but they've got one team down toward the bubble could get bumped out, but still, let's just say 4 out of 8 to make the math simple. Hockey East would have 6 out of 11 right now. These non-conference winning percentages are so far ahead of any other conferences that these 3 will dominate the NCAA field. We can make that statement right now. I cannot see really anybody bouncing back. Maybe the ECAC if Quinnipiac can't win their tournament, but it really looks like right now we're going to have one team from the ECAC, one team from Atlantic Hockey, and one team from the CCHA. There's a chance you could get two from a couple of those conferences, but the reality is you're probably going to see, at least 4 teams from Hockey East, at least 3 or 4 from the Big Ten, at least 3 or 4 from the NCHC. And don't be surprised with the NCHC. Some teams start getting hot down the stretch. Maybe get 5 out of their 8 teams in.
Yeah, I know we're talking about, non-conference, PairWise, all that kind of stuff. But right now, you're running out of non-conference games. So you are what you are. I think you're going to really see there's a lot of non-conference games this weekend. And then the Big Ten has a non-conference weekend, the 12th and 13th. And then other than the independents and like the teams with odd numbers, you're not going to see many non-conference games coming up here, at least from teams from the Big Ten or the Big Ten, NCHC, Hockey East. Obviously, you got the Bean Pot, you got a couple other things. Once we're through these next 2 weeks, the bulk of the non-conference games are gone, and you're going to be able to really see where we are as far as non-conference final records. They may fluctuate just a tad, but then you're going to start running into the word that we've used a lot, cannibalizing each other, and who's going to beat each other within the league, and who's going to hurt their PairWise, and is a bottom end team going to get somebody that really hurts them. So I think that there's a lot to be determined as far as who the teams are, but I think there's a lot already determined.
Yeah,
again.
There's not, you're right, Derek. I think, when we look at non-conference numbers after this past weekend, and this was one of the bigger weekends, and amazingly, some of the conferences didn't play much. Big Ten didn't have a ton of games this weekend out of conference. The NCHC didn't have a ton of games. A lot of their schools played games, but they played exhibition games this weekend. But with that, you still have over 75, close to 80% of the non-conference games in the country have already been played.
You know why they didn't play last weekend? Why do you think a lot of the Big Ten teams didn't play last weekend?
A lot of World Junior players missing. Might as well take an exhibition game instead.
Yeah. My series was supposed to be this past weekend against Minnesota, and we mutually agreed to move it. It is what it is, and at the end of the day, they're starting to learn. That's why you don't see Michigan in the Great Lakes. They're starting to learn that these are big weekends, that they're going to lose a lot of players, and they want to make sure that they're okay. So play an exhibition game against Canadian school, and then dive back in. Now, that being said, Minnesota has Colorado College this weekend, and they're still going to be without 4 of their players, I think, depending on how the tournament plays out over this weekend. I go back to, we were at North Dakota, and it would have been about 2010, and we were so excited that their best 2 players were going to be gone. Brock Nelson and somebody else were gone at the World Juniors. Well, they got eliminated on Thursday.
In a quarterfinal game.
In the quarterfinal, yeah. And somehow they were in the lineup Friday in Grand Forks. I was like, there couldn't have been a flight that got home that quick. And somehow they were there. Somehow they were there. So that's why they're not playing a lot of games right now. And that's why there's a non-conference weekend for the Big Ten these next 2 weekends. So now you're really going to see all of the games over once you get through this next 2 weekends.
The strange thing about the PairWise right now is a win doesn't seem to help you very much right now, but a loss can push you down a little bit. And right now you talk about the leagues, ECAC. It's going to be the situation we saw last year. Well, a couple others got in. Cornell and Harvard made it in last year, but it took Colgate upsetting Quinnipiac to get Colgate in. This year, it's going to take an upset to get a second team in. Cornell right now sitting at 20th or 21st, and Clarkson at 30th in the PairWise. Clarkson's not going to be able to make up that ground. Cornell would have a really tough time about it. So you're probably right with all those. Atlantic Hockey, RIT is 17th. They've got 2 non-conference games left, Clarkson and St. Lawrence. And in the CCHA, Minnesota State is tied for 28th. Too much ground to make up there. So really, you're going to see a lopsided situation. And I guess what it's going to come down to as you get into the conference tournaments and then that selection when all the numbers in the PairWise finally mean 100% of what they're supposed to. There are going to be some disappointed teams in those good leagues that are going to end up sitting home by percentage points.
There's a couple really good games this weekend that you're going to see pop up that are going to mean a lot. The Desert Classic, as Jimmy mentioned, that's going to be big. But a sneaky game, a sneaky one, and this could be a big one as far as they go. Princeton and New Hampshire. That's going to be a big game. And Princeton's played well this year.
Right.
That's not a gimme. And New Hampshire really needs to rebound because if they don't, that could push them down.
Yeah, Princeton's coming off a 5-2 win over Harvard this past weekend, but they're still 44th in the pairwise. So if New Hampshire can't get the sweep out of there, if they do, doesn't do a ton for them. But if they lose one of those games, again, it can push them right back down. As I look at the bottom bubble of the pairwise right now, let's start from 17 where RIT sits. No room for error. You lose a couple of league games if you're RIT, you'll drop down. Arizona State right now, they've got some tough teams coming in this weekend. Harvard was probably supposed to be a team that was going to be a pairwise booster. But right now, Harvard's a pairwise detractor if you lose to them. So you can't lose to Harvard, and then you have Lowell and Omaha on the other side. Neither of those teams doing a ton to boost your pairwise. So if Arizona State doesn't come out of this weekend, and then after that, again, no room for error because they don't have a ton of teams. I think they have one more series against the top 15. Cornell. And even that's not top 15 right now. Cornell's 21 in the pairwise. So, but you look at like Michigan, St. Cloud, they can make mistakes because if they make mistakes, they're probably going to be making them to teams that are, 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 in the pairwise because that's what NCHC and Big Ten teams are right now. New Hampshire, Minnesota, you can kind of go all those teams that are ahead. They can make a few mistakes here down the road because they're going to be playing teams that are really good, really strong. You can't do it against the last place team in your league. So you got to stay awake every night and can't take a game off because you feel like you can let your foot off the pedal, playing the worst team in your league. But you can make some mistakes. The teams on the bubble right now that are not from those Power 3 conferences, no room for error.
I'm going to go and ask a question of you. Ed asks all the questions normally. And it's a question that we've debated the whole year. Will an independent make the NCAA tournament this year? This is one that's going to be a whole year question.
Yeah, I still say Arizona State's in great position, 14, 3, and 5. I guarantee those 5 ties. You'd love to convert 2 of those to wins right now and be 16, 3, and 3. But 14, 3, and 5, pretty good. If Arizona State continues to play the way they're playing, and like I just said, there's not a ton of room for error in their schedule. But if they can continue to play really strong and get the wins that they're supposed to have, they should be able to get themselves in. You have Harvard, Omaha, Lowell. Those are the 2 of those 3 teams you'll play this weekend. Cornell twice, but then it's Augustana. Got to sweep them. Lindenwood, got to sweep them. Alaska, 4 games in a row, 2 at home, 2 on the road. Those are really tough ones. LIU and Alaska Anchorage, you got to win those games. There is a lot of travel still involved for Arizona State. Going to Alaska twice, once to Fairbanks, once to Anchorage. But I don't think that they can lose more than 2 more games.
Well, 2 more games would give them 12 wins, right? If you do the numbers, they've got 14 games left.
What Greg said.
Yeah.
And is that the magic number, 26?
Yeah, that's what he said when he's here.
Wins. So I think that's where they are. They can probably afford to lose 2 more games, but you almost have to handpick the ones you lose. Lose 1 to Cornell and 1 on the road to Fairbanks. That's about as good as it can get if you're going to pick 2 losses.
Ed?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes or no, independent team?
Independent, yeah.
I was still saying yes about Arizona State at this point last year, and by the end of January, they were pretty much out of it. But I think if there's going to be a year for them to do it, I'm going to put this at about maybe 75% chance, 80% chance right now.
Are we, because you guys were all under the fact of probably about a month ago, 2 independents. I think the ship sailed on Fairbanks.
Yes, I think it has. I don't know that they have the the games left. They have 2 at North Dakota that, go in and sweep those games, put yourself in really good position. 4 against Arizona State. But everything else, LIU is going to bring down your RPI. Anchorage isn't doing much to your RPI. 2 more against LIU, 2 more against Augustana, and then Stonehill to close out that. None of those teams are going to boost your RPI enough. So I think I'm still out on Alaska at this point.
Well, I want to get back to one last thing that we didn't get to in the first segment, and it's probably a fun way to end this episode. Should shootouts be used to decide a holiday tournament championship game, or just let them play 3-on-3 until someone scores? I've got a strong opinion on that, but I'll let you guys answer first.
I hate shootouts to decide a championship. I'm just going to keep it simple. I don't know what the solution is. I know I've sat through Beanpot championship games back when they would play 5-on-5 until somebody scored. I sat through semifinals that went, both, the early game, the 5:00 game would go to triple overtime, and then the second game doesn't end until 1 a.m. I get it. It's not great for student athletes, middle of the season. I've sat through consolation games. I remember being in a consolation game that at the Syracuse tournament years ago that went triple overtime, and they didn't know what to do. They just said, well, I guess we keep playing. Coaches, I understand, don't want to lose pairwise points. They don't want games to be counted as losses if they should have been ties. But I just don't love seeing shootouts as the way that you have to decide whether or not a team wins a championship. I think you win championships in much different ways. And if you play 20 minutes worth of 3-on-3, I guarantee you would find a goal scorer in that time.
I don't like it in a championship, but I don't know how you change the rules for just championship games. Yeah, I think every game has got to be determined the same way. We're talking about pairwise. I mean, can you imagine if you go somebody goes 5 minutes and gets a tie, and somebody goes 19 minutes of 3-on-3 and gets a loss, how that would affect? So I think that I don't like it. I don't like a shootout to decide it. I thought it was exciting watching Arizona State in the shootout against Cornell to see who won, but it was a little bit of a downer on the championship win. But I don't know how you decide that and how you would rank that, because it does matter. Those pairwise points do matter. I mean, a tie after 5 minutes of 3-on-3 compared to where we're at as far as the playing 19 minutes and losing. So I think that there's got to be some sort of, you got to figure something out. And I don't know the answer to it, but I agree with you. I don't like it in the championship game, but I don't know what the solution is either.
Well, I don't think we should do them any differently, because every regular season game should be counted the same way. I don't care if it's the Beanpot or the GLI or the Big Red Freakout. They all count the same. And it's hardware. It's nice, but ultimately it's just another item in the trophy case, and not something that means what a league championship or an NCAA tournament win means. So, I just play all the regular season games the same. I understand how disappointing it is for something with great tradition like the Beanpot, but yeah, let's just play them all the same way.
I agree with you. And that's where I said, I think it is anticlimactic on a championship of something like the Beanpot, but you can't have two different ways to decide games when it's so razor thin of getting in the NCAA tournament. So if you're going to make me pick one side or the other, Ed, I'm with you on this one.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up there, I guess. Thanks, guys.
I shocked you.
I mean,
I shocked you.
That's the way you got to look at it. It is what it is. I mean, I still don't like the designated hitter, and I've lost that battle for permanently, I guess, now at this point. So, me and former ECAC Commissioner Steve Hagwell are still mired in the past in some ways, but he's retired and I'm getting closer every day. This podcast is sponsored by the NCAA Men's Division I Frozen 4, April 11th and 13th at XL Energy Center in St. Paul, Minnesota. Visit ncaa.com/mfrozen4 to get your tickets today. For Jim Connelly, for Derek Schooley, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll see you next time on USCHO Weekend Review.